Hello, my dear friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Samantha, and this is the Mooncast. First and foremost, I wanted to thank everyone for their patience last week as there was no Mooncast. I will be explaining exactly why there wasn't one in this podcast, and you'll notice it might be a little maybe jaggedy because usually I have something of a script to follow, but today is just kind of a more casual kind of Mooncast, a more casual atmosphere. The first thing that I wanted to touch on today is that I have been talking about a membership program that I've wanted to start for some time, and at this point it just doesn't feel like the right time to do that. Again, I'll explain why throughout this Mooncast. It will happen in the future, but I think that maybe I just need a little more time to be able to sort things out and to really make it worth your while. So, let's get on to the topic at hand. About 2.5 years ago now, I made a Instagram account where I could just share solely witchcraft related pictures and information and things like that. As most of you know, I've been a studying witch for many, many years now, and I thought that it might be nice to share what I've learned. And then I started delving a little more deeper into the social media aspect of everything, and I started reading about how to gain followers and how to reach more people, and some of those things worked and some of those were just complete dead ends, but they were all a lot of work. If I didn't have witchcraft as a topic or feel the need to present myself to everyone, I probably wouldn't have any kind of social media. And let me tell you why. Throughout my adventure into learning about social media, one thing that was brought up is to develop a niche for yourself, because if you have a niche, then more people will come to see that niche. And so, like you, there are many facets to who I am. I am not just one thing, and I really struggle with presenting only one side to myself. I have many interests. I've mentioned that before, that I'm something of a nerd. I love to read, and I read a lot of different things. I watch a lot of different entertainment. There's just more to me, and you most likely, than what we see online, which is almost obvious, but at the same time it's not. Because even if you're aware of the multi-dimensional parts of humans, if you're aware of the multi-dimensionalness, you still can easily get caught up in the trap that what you see online is this person's everyday life, and this is their interest, and this is what they do, and when you get down to it, this is all they do. And it's really not fair to us, I don't think. I think that we rob ourselves of discovering this just beautiful diversity that we have within ourselves and within others. It's it's almost fathomless. So in creating this niche or even aesthetic for myself online to kind of ferry in this knowledge around witchcraft, I had to pick and choose what it was that I shared with my followers. And I know I'm not a really big account. I'm not a major influencer of any kind. But I do have now, well over 2,000 people, which is astonishing to me that there are even that many people that have an interest in anything that I have to say. I'm still shocked to it. But in the last 2 years since I started that account, I've learned a lot about myself. And I have learned a lot about how to manage those accounts and how to present myself. But, especially during the year 2020, I had a lot of extra time to kind of invest in that. So that was at kind of the point where I decided that I would make this into a thing and that I would continue writing my books about witchcraft and doing whatever it was that I was supposed to be doing. So, with all that being said, there's one aspect of me that I chose not to include in whatever it was I was talking about or going over on the Sage Witch, on that profile and on this podcast and YouTube channel, is I chose not to include my study and fondness of Norse paganism. And there is a lot of reasons why I chose not to include that. I know that I talk a lot about witchcraft being secular and it doesn't need any kinds of gods or anything, and sometimes my witchcraft is very secular, and at other times I include elements of Norse paganism into my practice. But one reason that I chose not to include Norse paganism into what I present to you is because of the community, the online community and offline community that surrounds it. There seems to be, in a lot of cases, not all cases, but in many accounts that I visit myself, there's a focus on like this warrior archetype and aggression. And there's nothing wrong with a warrior archetype or even attitude, but it needs to be balanced with other aspects of life. And I don't want to involve myself in aggression and especially the hyper masculinity that's often portrayed in tandem with the Norse pagans. That, and to be blunt, the appropriation by white supremacists and neo-Nazis is not a battle that I felt comfortable enough with my skills as, I guess, what would be like an online manager of myself through social media. I did not feel that I was able to fight that fight. I very much wanted the focus to remain on spirituality, on connection and healing. And I thought perhaps that if I included this somewhat controversial kind of paganism path, that I would spend too much time defending my own views, because there's also, as with any path, there are people who believe that their way is the one way, and they won't hesitate to argue with you about it. And my choices were to either ignore those people or to have to defend my own views. And if you ignore those people, then you're basically, I feel, allowing them to have a platform and use your platform to convey their ideals. And I couldn't let that happen. And I also didn't want to spend time just defending myself. So I hope that part makes sense. I myself have Scandinavian and Nordic ancestors. A lot of my ancestors come from, the Slavic regions as well as Scandinavia. And it's something that has perforated my life in little ways, little things that were handed down, especially with my family from the Midwest. I had a lot of family members that were born and raised in North Dakota, and they were Norwegian and Swedish and what have you. And so those little cultural things that were passed down that I still kind of have as a part of myself today interested me in that path of paganism. And no, my Scandinavian or Nordic family members and ancestors, maybe my ancestors, but my family members that I knew were definitely not pagans. In fact, they were Lutheran. And so I'm not trying to pretend that I come from some ridiculous long line of Norse pagans, but I do know that at some point in history, my ancestors did practice their own brand of paganism. And that's always been an interest to me, to understand how they connected to the land and how they saw life and how they interpreted life. And a lot of those interpretations can be found in, things like the Havamal, the Poetic Edda, Prose Edda, and all the other, sagas and manuscripts that have survived from that time. And my lover and I both really enjoy learning those stories, because for us, they have been ways for us to somewhat make sense of life, because there's a lot of, dare I say, like parables in those stories and things that are applicable today. And if they're not applicable today, they were during those times. And if you understand history and study those cultures, you understand how that can be worked into modern life. But I digress, and this is something that I can do a whole nother podcast on if anybody wants to know more about it. But my point is that I didn't want to have to choose a camp on social media, because the Norse pagan camp can be very rigid. And again, like I said, it's being appropriated and has been for many, many, many years by people like white supremacists and neo-Nazis and things like that. And I never in my life want to be associated with them in any way, shape, or form. I think that they have a very, very narrow view and understanding of the Norse gods and the culture from which they come from. And bluntly said, it sickens me. So there's my my declaration on that. But as I was saying, I did not want to have to choose a camp, so what I did was I created a second profile for myself so that I could share all of the silly Norse things that I did. I do a lot of sewing, I make jewelry, I craft charms and items, and I even make full rune sets from wood that I harvest. I don't really harvest it as much as scavenge it. And I cut these sticks into discs and I hand burn and condition and make bags for these rune sets. And I figured that if I could separate my more secular witchcraft self from my Nordic witchcraft self, that in case I needed to fight that battle, I wouldn't lose both of those venues. But in the last couple weeks, I've been given the opportunity to actually help support my family by making these items and selling them online as well as in a local storefront where I live. And I am beyond shocked and grateful that this business in the city closest to me has chosen to carry my artwork, and I'm floored. I'm absolutely floored by it. But that, again, that proposes a problem, is that I do not have time now or resources to support or manage two different sites. So I'll be merging the two, and should I need to fight that battle of aggression and hard-headedness, then so be it. I feel that now, as opposed to 2 years ago, I'm much more adept at managing my online presence, and I just don't think it's fair to my followers to leave that part of myself out. It's an important part of myself, and I know I've mentioned this a few minutes ago, but my witchcraft is still very secular. I do not follow Ausatru, and definitely none of the focus religions that are inspired by the Norse gods and culture. I have my own brand of how I communicate with the Norse personifications of natural forces in the universe, because that's what I see them as. I don't see them as just physical beings, literal physical beings, which I don't think that we should at all. And I think I've mentioned that in previous podcasts, that the pantheons and the gods that we choose to work with are ultimately personifications of natural forces in nature and the cosmos and in the happenings of life. That's what a lot of the stories about these gods are for. They're for us to learn from and to apply that knowledge and wisdom to our own lives. So we're all so very unique, and we're so unique in the way that we practice our spirituality and how we connect to nature and what gods we choose to. And I guess I've kind of come to the conclusion that if I'm not for you, then I'm not for you, and that's okay. and I don't feel the need to overly explain myself. I know this is going to be a very much longer podcast than what you're used to, but I feel this is all very, very important to convey. I'm not sure how I'm going to start merging these accounts. I will, however, put a link in the description of this podcast to my other page that you can visit, and if you're interested in any items, you can visit my shop and what have you. And I feel that by merging these two niches, as I said, I feel like I'll be able to present myself more fully to you, and hopefully everything will make more sense, and hopefully it will be more comfortable for me. So, again, I know this is a longer podcast than you're used to, and it's very rambly, but I thank you if you've made it all the way to the end. And that's all I really have to say. So, if you see some changes happening on the Sage Witch, now you know why. So, I guess that is truly this time about it. I want to end this by thanking you all from the absolute bottom of my heart for growing with me and staying with me throughout this process of figuring out who I am, but more so who I am in relation to the witchcraft community. So I hope all that makes sense. I'd be certainly happy to answer any of your questions. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Spotify or Buzzsprout, I'm not sure actually if there's a comment section. I've never really looked. But if you're on YouTube, please feel free to leave your questions, or you can also contact me on Facebook or Instagram at the Sage Witch. So, I guess let's do this.